Okay, now we're recording. Now we're cooking with gas. Awesome. Okay, welcome everyone to our series, to another in our series of talks, The Gardens of Our Lives. I'm gonna take my mask down because we're socially distanced now. And it's produced as part of our residency, Victory Gardens for Diversity at the Terra Nova Park. Oh no, we've got a really noisy raven. We're worried about construction, but we have to worry about the ravens. And please stay muted until the end of the talk, and we'll take some questions from you. If you have questions, do them in the comments, and then after Catherine's done, I can look at the comments. And we're sharing one laptop, so again, we're running by the seat of our pants here. So Catherine's going to be taking over this laptop in just 1 minute. Catherine Shapiro and I live in Vancouver on the north side of the Fraser River, so we'd like to acknowledge our gratitude for having the privilege to be here on the unceded ancestral territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And as our residency is based on the south side of the Fraser River, I'd also like to acknowledge our gratitude to the Kwantlen, Musqueam, Katzie, Semiahmoo, Tsawwassen, Kikite, and Coquitlam nations. Long before the original Victory Gardens in World War II, the Coast Salish, who have lived here for thousands of years, were the first gardeners and used plants such as red elderberry and Oregon grape as natural dyes. And since Catherine also loves to spin fiber, I was thinking about the Cowichan sweaters from Vancouver, the iconic, beautiful wool sweaters from Vancouver Island. And it was interesting because I was thinking, well, I wonder what they use to dye the wool. And so I looked and looked and looked for the answer to that question, and the answer was they don't. They don't dye the wool with anything. They leave the natural color of the wool, which is why it has that beautiful muted palette. And I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole, and I found out that there's a connection to World War II in that in World War I and World War II, soldiers from Vancouver Island actually got permission to wear Cowichan sweaters underneath their uniforms to keep warm. So I thought that was an interesting thing. Catherine Shapiro and I love to do research, and we often go down many, many rabbit holes. And so I come by it honestly, but Catherine is the most well-researched artist I have ever met. Catherine Shapiro went to the San Francisco Art Institute for a couple of years in the late 1960s and immigrated to Canada in 1970. Settling in the Caribou with her husband, they set up a printmaking studio, and Catherine started gardening. Moving to Vancouver in 1974, she continued making multimedia work that expresses her growing knowledge about plants and focusing on women's contributions to the development of horticulture. In the 1980s, Catherine began making environmental works from plant materials that she foraged or grew, including nettle, hemp, cedar, wisteria, artichoke, mallow, flax, and bamboo. These interests have continued to inform her work and have given her the opportunity in the last few years to mentor young artists in growing and processing indigo, as well as to be artist in residence at the Means of Production Garden to continue this project. Working with indigo has led Catherine to making a wide variety of paints from botanical sources, which she has been using recently on a new series of cast paper sculptures and paintings. And I live just across the street, just over the churchyard from Catherine, and I'm often passing through here, and I can talk to her over her garden fence, socially distanced. And she always has some kind of new artistic project that she's working on. She's like, Lori, I gotta tell you about this. I gotta tell you about this. And lately, a lot of that has had to do with indigo and her beautiful relationship with indigo. So I am now going to hand this over to Catherine. I'm gonna socially distance myself over at the end of the porch. So Elisa, if you have any trouble seeing or hearing Catherine, please give us a shout out and let us know. All right, Catherine, take it away. Does that work? Can you see yourself? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm just going to start out going through some of the pigments that we're going to use today. We're going to use pollen, indigo, some rocks, cochineal, which is a bug, and various plants. First, I'm just going to go over what you need to make various paints. With your pigment, you need a binder. With watercolors, it's gum arabic. Egg tempera, it's egg yolk. Painting with indigo on fabric is soy milk. And oil paints, I'm going to use walnut oil. So I'm going to use the same pigments and go through the various binders, and then we'll go through the modifiers, because once you get the basis of the colors, then you can start changing them with modifiers such as cream of tartar, baking soda, vinegar, lemon, which change the colors, and it gives you a little indication of the pH and how colors, how you can change them through acid and alkaline, and you go back and forth. All right, so okay, so this is a pollen that Lori spotted, and she put it on Instagram, and I messaged her and I said, "Where'd you get that color?" She said, "Across the street from your house." So I went over to my neighbors, and it was, you know, it was just all over the sidewalk. So I went back 3 or 4 times and you know, swept it up and then put it through a very fine sieve, and it's the consistency of baby powder.
And it's from the pine tree, right?
I think so, but I'm not sure.
Which pine tree?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll have to ask my neighbor. And then we have cochineal, which I ground just to save time.
And what's that made from?
That's made from little bugs from Mexico that only, oh, here it is, that only live on one type of cactus, and I think it's the females that produce the color. And I bought this at Mawa, and they just look like little round, dark seeds. They look like little seeds, but they're bugs. And so I put them in a little mortar.
Sorry, Catherine, would you mind showing that again to us and hold it up to a camera a little bit more?
Sure.
You can kind of see yourself holding it up.
Can you see it?
So tilt it a little bit. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we can see that now.
Okay, good. I'll keep that in mind. So anyway, with all of these pigments, I always use small amounts because I just hate to waste any of it. So I just grind it as fine as I can. And then let's see, what else did I have? Pollen, okay. Cochineal Matter, okay. This is Matter, also from Mawa. I'm growing Matter in my garden, which I'll harvest eventually. It takes 3 years for the roots to mature. It's the roots that you harvest. And I had an experience at Earth and Gleaners. I took a workshop with Sharon Callis, and it was about, you know, dyeing fiber. And we dug up some matter that was at the MOP Gardens, and we were dyeing wool, and we got 16 different colors from that one root, and they were all sublime. They were just beautiful. Okay, oh, and then, oh, where's my rock?
And
Okay.
Maiwa, the place that you're talking about, is down on Granville Island.
It's on Granville
And
Island.
they sell all kinds of plants for making natural dyes.
Yeah, and they have, everything that they have is online, so you can look, but they have pigments from all over the world that you can buy that are already ground. And then this is soil from Portugal that my grandchildren brought me. They said, Grandma, what can we bring you from Europe? And I said, soil. So you can make this into a pigment. So we'll start, oh, can't leave the indigo out. Okay, so this is dried on indigo that I processed about 2 weeks ago, where I extracted the pigment from the leaves, and then you dry it, and then I'll show you, but I tested it this morning and it's nice. And then this is also indigo that I took off an indigo vat, which is on my kitchen stove. And you can take there's a crusty part. As you use it, it keeps crusting up, and then around the rim is a crust. And you can take that off and use that, grind that, and use that as a pigment. And I do both.
And what kind of indigo do you grow?
It's the Japanese tinctoria.
Persicaria tinctoria.
Yes,
Right. So
you're
it's
right.
Japanese indigo.
Well, actually, it's Chinese indigo. It originated in China, but it's known now as
And
Japanese.
is it easy to grow here, hard to grow?
Well, sometimes it can be tricky, and sometimes it's easy. It's just sort of varies a bit. The last 2 years, I've had problems with plants damping off. So, and they get quite tall and stringy. But I found that they're very delicate in the beginning, but once you get them out and they start growing in the ground, they're hardy, they thicken up, they bush out, and I have found no problems. Oh, and then this year, a friend of mine was gonna start a dye garden up in Seashell, and it was too late to start plants from seed, so I rooted 30 plants that she transplanted into her garden in Seashell, and she's harvesting those.
And is it an annual or perennial?
I grow it as an annual. I've tried many times to overwinter it, and haven't been able to do it yet. I've mulched it, and I've been, even covered it with plastic and mulch, and so far it hasn't overwintered. But I think it does in some places. And there's also annual varieties. Well, there's many kinds of indigo, right? And I know someone on Salt Spring, Esme Hendrick Wong, who has a fantastic dye. It's more than a garden, it's like a dye farm. And she grows various types of indigo, and she grows them as annuals. I mean, no, it's perennial, sorry. And, but I think it's a bit warmer there. And, but I saw them, and their stalks were thicker than my thumb. Yeah.
Wow.
And I just saw a program about a man in Mali. He's really famous, I forget his name right now, who grows a variety of indigo that's indigenous to Mali. And oh my God, it was incredible, because they were taking tiny little, my thumbnail, and making intensely dark dye. Yeah.
Wow.
He had a dye farm, indigo farm,
Wow.
and he's famous all over the world. I'm sorry, I forget his name at the moment. Okay, so let's start. I'm just gonna go quickly through these different pigments with different binders. Okay, so I guess I'll just point out the binders. Okay, so this is gum arabic for watercolor. And I just, this is how I got into painting, because I'm much more interested in painting with these pigments than I am in dyeing. Although I do dye things, it's as a painter that I come to this. And about 6 or 7 years ago, I was talking to Sharon Callis at a luncheon, and mentioned that I'd grown indigo like 40 years ago. And she asked me if I wanted to grow it at the MOP. And I said, no, I'm too busy. And then she called me back 2 weeks later and asked if I'd mentor a younger artist. And, you know, I said, okay. And anyway, so Gloria too was the artist, and she and I worked together growing indigo for 2 years at MOP. And during that time, I did an installation for All Souls, and I was trying to dye linen pulp with indigo. And I had no idea what I was doing, right, at that moment. And it wasn't working. I was getting this electric blue, and I wanted a dark, somber blue. So I went and Googled it, and it said you could make watercolor with indigo pigment and gum arabic. So I went and looked on my tube of paint, and it said gum arabic, indigo. So I went and made it, and I was telling Sharon a couple weeks later that I'd made indigo paint and paint from pollen from my Douglas fir. And so she talked me into learning about it so that I could teach it. And that's how I got involved.
Awesome.
All right, so we'll start with, oh, yes, very important. You gotta have beer caps.
Good thing that someone in your house drinks beer.
So these are really great because they're like little bowls, and then you can't make too much. You can make just enough. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through, I'll start with indigo. I ground some up. What I usually do, like this isn't ground that fine. And since I'm sure you don't want to sit there and watch me grind it, what I usually do when I'm painting is I just put a little soy milk. That's what you use to paint with indigo, is soy milk. In fact, most of these pigments you can paint with soy milk.
Just the soy milk that you buy from the store?
No,
Oh.
You make it.
Oh.
Okay, if you all want to learn about painting with soy milk, Google John Marshall. I hope his studio is surviving the fires. He's in California. I think he's in Napa or Sonoma. I really worry about him, but he's been working with indigo since he was 16. He's spent lots of time in Japan and worked with master dyers, and he does amazing work. And he has all this information in books and in tapes about how to paint with these pigments. So that's where I learned a lot. So I'm just gonna let this indigo soak in the soy milk, and I will, okay, so now I'm gonna make a little bit of watercolor with the Cochineal. So I'm just taking the powder, and I'm just gonna use a little bit. Of course, I don't have anything to stir it with.
Did you plug this in on the other side?
Yeah. Why?
It doesn't seem to be getting out. It's okay.
Okay, so I'm just stirring it. So I just make it as smooth as possible. So that's a watercolor, and we'll test it in a few minutes. Okay, I have never used this pollen, so we'll experiment with that. So I'm just gonna get like a little, okay. So I think I'll try the egg. Okay, so this is egg yolk for egg tempera, which is about my favorite thing to paint with, because it's very smooth. It's like the Russian icons in the churches are painted with egg tempera. And that is how it's luminous, and you can layer it and you can get incredible detail. And I learned that, everything I learned at first was that you use egg yolk. And then when I read further, it said that the finest detail is done with egg white. So I use both of them, and you can use both of them together.
I didn't know that. I always thought it was egg yolk.
Yeah, well, okay. So my dog chewed up my paintbrush while I was getting ready. So I'll have to use it as a little stir stick. So this is just egg yolk. And that looks a little thick. Can you see that? I hope so. So I'll add another little bit. Less is always better to go with.
And so what's the best surface for painting with that?
Oh, that's a great question. Okay. You're supposed to do it on boards that are prepared with gesso, rabbit skin glue, and I can't remember what else. And you paint it on, you sand it, and you do it, I think, 6 layers.
Wow.
I haven't done it, but I intend to. I've painted on paper with egg tempera just because I didn't have anything else. And it was great, it looks fine. But I've also painted with egg tempera on paper where it's kind of like waxy and you can scratch it off. So.
And with the indigo one that you're making, do you usually do that on paper or fabric or both?
Okay, for that, I usually paint with soy milk on fabric. And I'm sure I've done it on paper, but because when you prepare fabric, the whole thing with the soy milk is you have to, like if you're painting on silk or you're painting on cotton, with both of them, you scour it. That means you wash it with a special, Lori, oh no. My God, excuse me. Oh my God. Oh my God. Lori just fell backward, but she says she's okay. Are you really okay? It did not look like she was going to be okay. Oh my God. I'm glad you're laughing, Lori. Jesus, I thought. Okay, well. Okay, so here's my egg and pollen, and we'll test that in a sec. Okay, so now we're gonna go for an oil paint. I think I'll use Matter for the oil paint. So this is just ground up Matter. I'm just gonna use a little pinch. Okay, so I've got walnut oil here. And when I was doing research, I found out that linseed oil was used later, originally when oil paint was invented, which was right before, I think, beginning of the Renaissance. And before that, people painted with egg tempera. So oil paint was like, the new technique. And they used walnut oil or poppy seed oil because they were considered pure. So this is walnut. And I'm just, hope I don't pour too much. So you can see all of these ways are pretty easy. Once you know how to do it, so there's the walnut. So somebody's going to ask me, well, what's the ratio? I do it just till it's a consistency that I like. I don't make it too grainy and I don't make it too loose. I just try to find a happy medium.
It's interesting that you're doing oil because when I went to university in the late 80s, early 90s, oil paint was totally going out of vogue because it was seen as being environmentally unfriendly because of the turpentine, I guess, that you needed to work with. And it would make artists sick because they'd be breathing in all these fumes. And so at that point, acrylic was seen as the savior of the artists. And of course, acrylic is so bad for the environment.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's interesting that we come back to oil paint.
Well, what's the thing of, okay, that brings up a whole other area because, oh, I forget what I was going to say.
It's just so interesting that, you know, that acrylic and a lot of our materials are actually plastic.
Oh yeah, now I remember. Okay, if you look in the artist's handbook and you read, he's got in there a whole section on paint, and he talks about how oil paints, for instance, were made in the past, and they used everything. They used arsenic, lead, feces, urine, on and on and on. Just unimaginable combinations of things to bind pigment.
Wow.
Okay, so, you know, we don't want to use white lead. We don't want to use any of that. So basically, you know, like, I mean, that's what's good about making your own pigments. Is, you know, none of these are harmful. It's very pure. You know what you're putting into it.
So it's good for your body and for the environment.
Well, I mean, I can't think of any harmful results. Okay, so now, so I wanted, okay, well, I'm soaking that indigo, but I'm just gonna show you. My dog took my brush. Good. Okay, so I'm gonna use a little bit of, so here's my indigo, and I'm just gonna, so I would just, it takes a few, okay, so see how it's, takes a minute for it to start to lift. You see, you can start to see the pigment.
Beautiful.
And of course, you know, it takes patience. All of this takes patience, the grinding and the,
Just the sourcing of all the materials too, the growing.
yeah, it takes a commitment, you know, it takes a, okay. So what, I never follow this bit of advice, but when I've taught workshops, everybody's diligent except for me about this part. And that's keeping little samples of what you're doing. Unfortunately, this is cotton paper, and it pH the cochineal doesn't like, so it turns an odd color. But you can see on this little piece of cotton, I was playing around with cochineal, and you can just see some of the range of colors.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And we'll try some of those out. So, you know, just have a notebook, write down what you're doing, and make little samples so that you can kind of keep track of your own experiments. Because that's what's so much fun about this, is it's being like a mad scientist. you know, it's like really, you know, the more you get into it, the more mad it gets, because believe me, you start combining colors and combining, you know, just experimenting.
Infinite possibilities.
Okay, so this is the pollen, and that's pollen and egg yolk. Okay. So it's got a fabulous texture.
Wow.
That's another thing.
That's beautiful.
That's another thing about handmade paints, is the texture is really wonderful. It's very slidey, but look at that color. Now, a young person that was over here this morning we were talking about this because he took a pollen workshop I did years ago, and he told me that pollen is not light fast, that it will fade eventually. So you have to keep that in mind. A lot of these will not fade. You know, indigo doesn't fade, madder doesn't fade, but you have to kind of learn which ones are permanent.
And is there anything you can put on top of them to help protect that? Like a varnish?
I don't know.
Curious.
Okay, so now we've got our, so this is the one I think that was the soil from Portugal, I think. Okay. So this is, so just make, you know, okay, well, this is the soil, and I can tell it is because I didn't grind it. I just used it. So this is what happens when you don't grind it. You get little specks.
And you're using a mortar to grind it?
Yes, this is my cochineal only. I try not to mix pigments because, you know, you mess it up. So this is cochineal, and I have 2 or 3 of these.
And that's a ceramic?
This is ceramic, yeah.
Yeah, nice. Where do you find those?
Geez, I don't remember. But I've seen, you know, things up at the, you know, market that, you know, mortar and pestle, and just where, you know, I've got a lot of them just finding things. And also, I've used, you know, jars, and, you know, I've used rocks, you know, like if you're serious about this, if you're going to go into making paint like commercially, then you get, I think it's pronounced Mueller, and it's a big glass ball. It costs about $80, and it grinds really well because you do glass on glass, and you can grind it and grind it and grind it, and that's what makes the smoothest paint. But, you know, I buy paint sometimes from Daniel Smith, and I find a lot of his paints have grit in them. So, but anyway, I've used this Portuguese soil before and got it really fine, where it's just as nice as the pollen. Okay, so now let's see, which is this one. Uh-oh. Okay. 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 Well, this is interesting. I'll have to do it over again. Okay, so this is the cochineal. You see how it turned black? It's because of the paper, I think.
Oh.
Or, anyway, I'll make some. That's happened to me before. Cochineal is very sensitive to pH.
And what about when you're making that soy milk? Do you use water?
Yes, it's real simple. You just, you don't want to make too much, because John Marshall says that the enzymes are at their best when you use it in 3 days, and after that it isn't as good.
So the water that you use in that would be very important, because the pH of the water.
I just use tap water.
Okay.
You just, like, I do like a half a cup of soybeans, soak it for a couple hours, rinse it, put it in a blender and blend it until it looks like soy milk. Put it in a strainer, strain out the pulp. Usually I strain it twice. And then that's it. It's just, and if you're gonna paint on fabric with these pigments, what you do is you make your soy milk and you paint, like you stretch your fabric on something. I use embroidery hoops. I use anything I can find. I have all kinds of things that I stretch fabric on. And then you paint the soy milk on there, and then you cure it. In Japan, some people cure it as much as a year. I've cured it from, a matter of days to a year. And the first time I ever painted with indigo, just a sec here. Well, the first time I painted with it on fabric, it ran, just like, no, it bled, okay? So that's when I learned about scouring things and then putting the soy milk on and curing it. And then you're using, your binder is protein to protein. And so this is a piece of just cotton I had that's been stretched on here for ages. And I just want to show you how this is. See,
Beautiful.
It doesn't bleed at all, okay? So, okay, I want to do the cochineal in this dish and get it, because I think it's also reacting to the bottle cap.
Really?
Yes.
To the metal in the bottle cap?
Yeah, I think so, because it's, it shouldn't turn black. It should turn red. Okay, so now what do I want to make? What kind of paint do I want to make with the cochineal?
Watercolor.
Good idea. Okay, so we've got our cochineal, and I'm going to put in some gum arabic.
So your cochineal is all ground up.
It's ground up, yes.
And gum arabic.
And gum arabic. I've made a lot of watercolors. Okay, so. Huh. Well, this is going very dark too. You know what? I have cochineal upstairs. I wonder if this cochineal has just like lost its oomph.
Interesting.
Let me just see if I have some more already ground. Well, I don't know what to do because that's such a good one to change the color. I don't want to leave you all and go looking for cochineal.
That's all right.
So I'm just trying to think what other pigment I can show you how to modify colors.
Right. Well, you can talk about it. We were going to talk about the acid and the alkaline.
Okay. Okay, well, that's really too bad. I was really excited about that. Well, we could experiment with something else and see what we can get.
Sure.
I'm just not sure what. cute.
Well, let's talk about some of the other pigments that you've worked with.
Okay, all right. Okay, some of the other pigments. Wow, God, there's so many.
We talked about Wisteria.
Oh yeah, okay. Where is my Wisteria? Well, let me just show you these while I look. These are from England. These are from a cave that has various ochres. And a friend of mine was going there, and I asked her if she could go to this cave and buy me some pigments, and she did. And so for 8,000 years, they've been mining pigments.
Wow.
I know. So I got like an ochre color, a brownish red.
So those are mineral pigments.
Yes. Today, this young man that was here brought me this. This is ochre. So I was asking him, he and his family were camping up, I think along the Thompson, and he found this on the beach. He said this huge vein of it. So I was asking him to describe exactly, what, and he said that this tree, and I think he called it the Kush pine, had fallen, and that he thinks this happened like 100,000 years ago. And then sediment laid down over the tree, and the chemical reaction in all that time created this, and he gave me this. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah. What a neat observation to make too.
Oh yeah, and it's,
you need to know not only plants, but the geology of what's going on.
yeah, I mean, well, that's another aspect of these pigments is, last summer I went to hear a talk by the pigment hunter at the Trillium, and he understands the geology of all the rock formations and goes into great detail. And he shared with us these pine cones that had been buried in a landslide. And then again, the reaction of what was in the soil over, I don't know how many thousands of years, turned these pine cones blue. And he gave me a piece.
Wow.
And it's a beautiful blue pigment.
It's fascinating. There's geology and chemistry and botany, all these things coming together. There's just so many things.
Yeah.
You talked about Moringa too. What's Moringa?
Oh God, Moringa. All right. Okay, Moringa. This is Moringa. It's a plant that grows in Africa that I happened to see a documentary about, and it's like a very, very important food because it's very high in protein, and it grows in really dry places, and it's like a staple in parts of Africa. So I was seeing a naturopath, and she recommended this, and then a friend of mine said that she Googled it, and you can make a pigment out of it. And again, it's a very fine powder.
It's a beautiful green color. Does it make a green pigment?
I imagine so.
Cool. You haven't tried this yet?
I think I've tried a little bit, but I'm let's see. So what should I add to it? How about some egg?
All right.
Okay. Oh yeah, look at this. Well, maybe we can change the color of this.
Yeah, try that.
Okay, so see, there it is. So
Wow,
that's
it's
just
green.
egg yolk and moringa. So we'll put a little on our card. Oh yeah, it's lovely.
Beautiful. Nice.
So let's see. I'm going to add some lemon.
So you're going to change the acidity.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. I have no idea because I've never done this before.
This is something new.
Whoop, that was a lot. So,
So you told me that lemon and cream of tartar make things more acidic.
oh, it's certainly changing the texture, and I think
Right.
it is changing the color.
Uh-huh.
I didn't change it that much.
Interesting.
Smells nice. Okay, so I'll show you some of the oh, here's some interest. Okay, so I live near Main Street, and there's a store, it's the soap dispensary, and they sell pigments that are for makeup and soap. And I like to try everything. And so once in a while I buy a pigment and try it. And this is made from beets. Now, I wouldn't do this if you're planning to paint, you know, your masterpiece. I probably wouldn't use this just simply because I don't know about its, you know, how long it would last. Okay.
I think beets are more traditionally used as a food coloring rather than a paint that will last longer.
Okay, I'm going to use a little soy milk. The thing about the beet as a color, I've used it before.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's so beautiful. I mean, hard not to use it. See?
Gorgeous.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
Wow, I love this color. So, you know, if you were painting like with kids,
yeah,
or, you know, just having
Ephemeral
fun.
sketching, yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love this color.
Right.
Okay. Well, I'm going to add a little indigo.
Ooh.
Just to see. Okay, so that changed it, of course. It's more of a, looks like a bluish purple. Oops. Oh, that's
nice. Yeah.
that's, can you see that?
Very nice.
I find indigo with practically anything is beautiful. How much time do we have?
Okay, so we've got about 10 minutes. So
Is that all?
yeah, you wanted to talk a little bit about what a lake is.
Oh, yes. Okay. So in my garden, I have quite a few plants that I can make dyes from. Nettles, St. John's wort, indigo, Hopi black sunflowers, dahlias.
Snowberries you were talking about.
A snowberry makes a good dye. I'm growing alginate, which makes a dye. So, okay, okay, when I was first getting into this, it really bugged me because I couldn't figure out how you took a liquid dye from a plant that you made either by simmering the leaves or the petals, or you make a solar dye. You want to pass that to me? So a solar dye is like, here I've taken dahlias from my garden and I've put them in a jar and I've left them in the sun for a couple weeks. So when I go to make a lake, which is, you know, when you go to a art supply store and you see watercolors in those little boxes, those are lakes. So it just, what it does is it, okay, to make a lake, I'm gonna take that solar water, I'm gonna put it in a stainless steel pot with a little bit of ash water, which is just ashes that I got from a friend's fireplace. It's alkaline, right? And I'm going to add that and I'm gonna simmer them on the stove. The important thing is do not boil it. Let it come up slowly and keep it below a boil. If you boil it, it'll turn brown. Okay, so what you do, so you're simmering it, and then there's magic. That's because you take a tiny little bit of alum, which is acid, and you put it in the pot. And what, so the liquid is called plant liquor, I think it's called. And so you take the plant liquor, you add the ash water and the alum right under your nose collects it's called the substrate, the material substrate in that colored water and pulls it together. And the first time I saw it, it just made me ecstatic. I couldn't believe it. It's very exciting.
And you had some examples from Caitlin, didn't you?
Yes, yes, yes.
So what you think of as a watercolor kit, it usually has these dried.
Yeah,
That's a lake. Those are lakes.
These are lakes. Caitlin French here in Vancouver made these beautiful paints. And she's a professional. And this card shows you why making your own pigments is special, because you can get these nuances of color and use unusual things to get color. And that's why you bother, because it's really special.
And can you show us some of the pieces that you were gonna pull from inside?
Yeah, and then I wanted to show you some books too.
Yes, yes. Here, maybe I'll show the first book.
Okay.
And you can grab your stuff.
Oh, well, wait.
Oh, okay. Well, you got it here. Yeah, you got everything.
Okay.
I thought you had to
And I've got another piece inside. Okay, so real quick, because I'm running out of time. I don't want to get these dirty. Okay, so these are some things I painted on fabric, on a very light cotton. This is cochineal, indigo, and basil.
We'll put these up on the blog so that people
Okay,
can
yeah.
have a better look at them.
Okay, and this is indigo and cochineal on gauze.
Beautiful colors.
And this is indigo on gauze.
And that's a lantern.
This is a huge lantern.
Right. So maybe can we then talk about the project that you're working on right now?
Oh, yes.
That would be great.
Do I have time to show them any
Oh, the
books?
books, yeah. Maybe we'll leave the books for the end.
Okay. Talk, Lori.
Yeah. I'll just sing a little song here. Do, 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 do.
Okay. So this is only part of what I'm working on.
Wow.
I'm doing an installation that's going to be at the Still Moon Arts Festival. Okay. So this is paper that I've made from a fiber called Mitsumate, which is a Japanese fiber. And I've made the paper, all of the paper in this, and the lighter blue is indigo paper that I dipped in a vat. The darker one, the tree, I painted on the same kind of paper. And then the light pieces, the moon and this space down here are, you know, unpigmented. So this is going to be, this is the front panel of a cast paper sculpture I'm making that's going to be hanging on a tree stump, a cedar tree stump. And the outside of this is made out of cedar paper.
Wow.
So,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Here, I'll hold it while you talk about the books.
Okay. It's, wait, hold it on both ends because it's fragile. Okay. Okay. So some books, because I think books are my best tool. Okay, so this book cost $80. I got it at Mawa against my better judgment, but I'm so glad I bought it because this is all about lakes. I've read this book through twice. I need to read it a couple more times, but at the back, there's a simple explanation of making a lake.
We'll put these on the blog too, so people can see which ones.
Okay, wild color. So this is all, has all the different plants that you can use for dye. And it's basically to make dye, but then you can take it and make pigment by making lakes. Okay, so I have quite a few books on indigo, but this is really good because they go into making resists and you know, making, you know, thickening indigo to paint with it on fabric and, you know, all things that I like to do. Do I have another minute?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I wanted, these are, okay. So, look, so these are some of the kind of experiments that I do just to teach myself what I'm trying to learn. So this is an embroidery hoop.
Wow.
This is silk. This is indigo that I did with salt. It's just really, it's really easy. You just mush salt, kosher salt into fresh indigo leaves, and you get a variety of colors. And I painted freehand a resist on here, and then I mushed the indigo in between the resist lines. And then, and these are experiments. This is just trying to figure out what I'm doing, right? Because I want to paint on big pieces of silk eventually. So again, this was freehand. These are my dahlias that I'm growing in my garden.
Oh, beautiful.
And that's why I have the dahlia solar dye, because I want to make it, see if I can make a lake that will work to get a dark black red like the flowers are in the garden. So this is again to resist. This is again the indigo just pushed with my fingers. And this color here is Cochineal and Matter. And then, so I build up colors. I go layer on layer. And eventually, for the detail, I will have a black, red indigo, like, you know, like a really, because the colors of the flowers are so dark. So I just say to people, you know, experiment, play around, you know, have fun. Bound to learn something.
And didn't you tell me that almost any plant can produce some kind of color?
Yeah, you just have to experiment. And with indigo, Esme on Salt Spring Island told me, never be disappointed. Because when I started with indigo, I only thought of it as dark blue. And she said, no, Catherine, any color you get is wonderful. And it really changed my attitude. So don't be disappointed when you're doing this. Just accept whatever color you get and learn from it and carry on.
I love it. That sounds great. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, sorry about the cochineal, everybody.
Oh, no, that happens. But that's a good example of like to leave it open and experiment.
Well, I think it's just, you know, I should have tested it before. Anyway, I'm
That's
gonna
okay.
put this away.
All right. Okay, here we are. And I'm just going to check the comments here, the chat. What's the name? Oh, okay, let's ask. I'll ask Catherine the name of the farm on Salt Spring Island and the name of the grower. She just went inside for a minute here. Catherine,
Yeah, just a second. Yes.
what's the name of the farm on Salt Spring and the name of the grower?
Oh, my book's just.
Oh no.
Her name is Esme Hendrick Wong,
Okay.
and her called Living Color.
Living Color is the name of the farm? Okay.
I think that's the name of her website.
The website. Okay. Well,
Yeah.
we'll put that up on the blog.
Yeah, I'll get the whole.
The details and
Yeah,
everything.
yeah.
And there's more questions here, which I'll just check. Catherine, do you have recommendations for how to buy, source affordable gum Arabic? Also, have you painted with soil onto fabric?
Have I painted with soil on fabric? I can't remember offhand. I only had 2 hours sleep last night, so I'm a little.
You did really well. You did really well.
Oh, good. I can't remember, but probably I have, but I just say try it. You know, just, you have to be willing to be a little bit of a scientist.
And where do you get your gum Arabic?
Oh, I just bought it here in town at
Okay.
Art. Somebody was telling me there's a place in Toronto called Above Ground that sells cheap art supplies, but I'm
Okay.
gonna see about my rabbit
Okay.
skin glue and stuff there.
That sounds good. Awesome. And Thanushi says, what do you recommend for silk ribbon dyeing? Because Thanu works with weddings. So for making silk ribbons, for dyeing silk ribbons, what would you recommend?
What kind of silk? What does she, what's
Like,
the
you know, just for bouquets and things like that?
Oh,
A silk ribbon. So like silk, but it's a ribbon.
so how to dye it?
Yeah.
How to dye it. Again, I would just, I don't know if you have experience with making an indigo vat, but I'd make an indigo vat and dip it and you know.
How do you usually prep silk for receiving dyes?
Okay, you scour it. You
Right.
buy, there's a special soap,
Uh-huh.
and it's very, it's very concentrated, so you just use a little bit. Again, you put your silk in a stainless steel pot full of water, a little bit of soap, and that you bring it right to the boil, and you boil it for like an hour, and then you have to rinse it a lot. And then, because silk has, like most fabrics that you buy, they have gum, they can have dirt, they can have different things. You want to get that out, and then it can receive the indigo or the other dyes.
Awesome. Good. And Jen was also asking about the snowberry. Have you actually worked with snowberries?
I haven't, but I was in a fiber workshop with Sharon where I watched other people dyeing with it, and it was a lovely green, kind of like your shirt, but paler.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So thank you all for listening and for your questions. We have indeed flew by the seat of our pants. I literally flew by the seat of my pants.
Oh my God. That was so terrifying.
That was like a cartoon.
No, it wasn't.
So I literally fell on my head.
You are so lucky, Lori.
You blew me away.
I blew you away. Oh, God.
All right, then. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Have a fantastic day. And my next talk is going to be on October 1st, and we're going to talk about kinder gardens. So check that out. Bye for now.
That was not